The joys and freedom of millions of children started with just one feeling. What if the child slave Sabo was my daughter? Sabo, who was about to be sold to a brothel. Sabo, whose desperate father lay in a heap at my feet. Perhaps it all started with a spark of compassion and today become a worldwide movement. I believe that each one of us is born with two natural gifts, consciousness and compassion. Both are the core reasons of our being. When we feel the suffering of others as our own suffering, with a strong drive to take action, that is compassion. God is not so meager that He has blessed us with only a little of compassion, which we have confined to our families and friends. We need to go beyond that. All that is required is to enlarge our circle of compassion. A touch of compassion is what makes each of us a problem solver, an innovator who is ready to accept all challenges and solve them. When we work towards making our world a better place, each one of us becomes a compassionate leader.
I'm sure you all are thinking, and I think you're thinking the same thing as me, that was incredible, right? And we're all here celebrating the spirit of dialogue. That's the theme of WEF this year, the power of dialogue. But I look at the spirit of dialogue as many think of it as a sign of weakness, but I don't look at it like that. I think it is the highest form of courage. It is the courage to listen more than we lecture. It is the courage to lead with compassion. And that is what we're going to talk about in this panel today, because compassion is not just a sentiment or sympathy. It is a practice of justice. And the Satyarthi movement reminds us that a fragmented world cannot be healed by policy alone. It requires a moral foundation. And today we're joined by leaders who are weaving that foundation back together. And with that, I want to introduce the co-host of this panel, Ms. ASMITA Satyarthi.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Awesome. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to be here today. My name is ASMITA Satyarthi, and I'm the CEO of the Satyarthi Movement for Global Compassion. We are so proud to be co-hosting this very important dialogue with the World Women Foundation. I'm really appreciative of the various conversations they've put together this week. Rupa and her team, you guys are rock stars. I've been following so many of the conversations. The leaders have been speaking out, speaking truth to courage, and very proud to be partnering with you today. Our founder, Nobel Peace Laureate Kailash Satyarthi, defines compassion not as a soft emotion, but actually the most powerful force that there is. Because compassion is the force that comes when you believe somebody else's problem is actually your own to solve. And you do whatever you can in your power to solve that problem. And here's how it's different from empathy. Empathy is great, it makes us feel for the other person. But a lot of times we get very overwhelmed. A lot of times we get fatigued if we are feeling empathy and carrying the pain in our heart. With compassion, or as how we're trying to redefine the word compassion, there is a healthy distance between yourself and the problem. So you're able to look at it in a very sort of objective manner, and you're able to find pragmatic and practical solutions. And we believe that that is what the world needs today. I've been going to different conversations this week, interacted with different CEOs, investors, business leaders today. And there are sort of three phrases that stood out to me. Any guesses as to what they might be? That's kind of true. I mean, we have been wondering why we don't do this in the summer. Anybody else?
I'm sorry, what was
The most common phrases that we heard this week.
the AI, Greenland, and we don't like Trump.
This is why we love KERRY. I was actually going to say AI, and AI. And also that name that we didn't want to take, but we did. So yeah, but artificial intelligence, also global geopolitics. We also heard the phrase leadership a lot in terms of, what kind of leadership we need for the world. And, there's also been, at least in the business communities very prominently, there's been this sense of misapprehension and worry in terms of what, is going to happen. There's a sense of uncertainty. And, it was making me wonder if there is a way that we can actually learn to coexist with our ambitions, but also a genuine and an honest concern for humanity and the planet. I've been thinking about artificial intelligence, and of course, like everybody else, I realize the profound impact it can have on our world. I mean, I think the repercussions, actually, we don't even realize. We're not even able to kind of fathom the impact artificial intelligence can have in the world. And it has the power to transform industry. It has the power to transform society. I heard somewhere that 86% of teenagers now are actually talking to ChatGPT instead of their own friends and families. And it also makes me worry, because we do realize the power that it has. Now, what if this power is harnessed to damage humanity? Think of the biases that are inherently present. Think of the inequalities that exist. What if all of those are exacerbated by humanity and it gets used, as it is currently, to create more divisiveness, more hatred, more injustices in the world? What we are calling out for is compassionate AI. What we're saying is that compassion needs to be a design principle as we look at structures and foundations of artificial intelligence. We have to figure out how technology and humanity can actually coexist and solve problems for the world, not create it. And make sure that no one gets left behind. In terms of geopolitics, wars and conflict actually create way more damage than just to our markets. 40 million children live in conflict-affected areas. I heard somewhere that 0.001% of the global rich actually own 3 times the wealth of those in the bottom 50% of the world. How many countries in this world actually have achieved gender equity? Does anybody want to guess? 0? It's actually 0. So I think it's time for us to call for compassionate leadership. I'm so proud and privileged to have 3 very solid, compassionate leaders in the world. What compassionate leadership asks for is authenticity and moral courage to actually move from dialogue to action. It demands that we be honest with ourselves, and it doesn't have to come at the price of ambition. I mean, the main, the point that we'd like to make is that it can coexist. In fact, also strengthen ambition, because ambition can become more resilient, ambition can become more holistic, ambition can become more sustainable as it brings the whole world along. So with that, I want to introduce the 3 panelists. I'm going to read out so I don't forget anything important. They're all. Okay. So we have KERRY Kennedy with us. KERRY is the president of the Robert and Ethel Kennedy Human Rights. She has devoted more than 40 years to the pursuit of equal justice. I've been seeing her for probably 35 of those years. And promotion and protection of basic rights and the preservation of the rule of law. She works on a number of issues, including child labor, women's rights, indigenous rights, freedom of expression, ethnic violence, criminal justice reform, immigration, and environmental justice. She has led hundreds of human rights delegations. She has served on the board of the Amnesty International USA Leadership Council, the US Institute of Peace, the Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation, the Advisory Committee for the Association of American Indian Affairs. She's also received the Humanitarian Award from the Congress of Nobel Peace Prize laureates and many other honors. Welcome, KERRY. It's such an honor and privilege. Let's give her a big round of applause. We have with us Martin Chungong. He is one of the most compassionate leaders of our time, a Secretary General of the InterParliamentary Union. He was re-elected to a third term in 2022 with more than 4 decades of experience and knowledge of parliaments at national and international level. He has dedicated his life to promoting and building democracy worldwide, which is extremely relevant to today's world. He's also driving the IPU's efforts to bring more young people into politics and has worked a lot on gender equity. In 2020, he was elected chair of the Global Board of the International Gender Champions. We have my sister, Lisa Christine, with us. Some people use data to understand the world. What Lisa does is she shines a light to the humanity of those numbers. I firmly believe that the numbers I just quoted are actually just not mere numbers, and we need to look at them as very strong evidence that something's got to change, and Lisa does just that. She has presented her work at the UN, the Vatican, Nobel Summits, the World Economic Forum, and then she partners with global institutions in her fight against forced labor. She has worked with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. She's a recipient of the Lucy Humanitarian Award and a founder of the Human Thread Foundation. Welcome, Lisa. So my first question is to you, Kerry. In today's political climate, it becomes a little difficult for even compassionate leaders like yourselves to stand firm in moments of political backlash, violence. What does compassionate leadership look like when the cost of speaking up is so high? And how do leaders maintain moral clarity in these difficult times?
Thank you so much for that question. First of all, it's great to be here and on the stage with 3 of my favorite people on earth. So and with all these fabulous women. And my daughter, Cara Kennedy Cuomo, right here. And what is your name? Ayati. Ayati. How old are you, Ayati?
I'm 13.
13, isn't she great? So
let's give her a big round of applause.
Okay, so, it's interesting. Well, I was on my way here. I came from Milan, and I was at this dinner with all these investors, major investors, and one of them has $500 million. No, is it $500 million? $500 million in management, assets under management. And I said, what are your biggest concerns going forward and into the WEF? And he said something that surprised me. He said, we have all these CEOs of mid-sized companies, so 5,000 to 100,000 employees, and they are very vulnerable. He said, first they went through Brexit, and then they went through COVID, and now they've got Donald Trump, who's, putting tariffs on one day and taking them away the next, and it's very destabilizing. And AI is going to completely transform the way they work and all their employees work over the next 5 years, and they're not prepared. And so they have this tremendous anxiety. Now, what I've learned in the human rights field, so I feel compassionately towards them, or empathic, at least towards them. And we all have to if somebody is suffering. But then you think, what can you do? Okay? And what's interesting that I've learned in the human rights field is that the difference between a victim and a hero is action with a loving heart. Okay? So when you think about Martin Luther King stuck in that Birmingham jail, you're not thinking of a victim, but of course he was a victim. But you're thinking of an activist and a hero. Why? Because he took action writing that letter with a loving heart. So what's missing to me among those, not just low-level or mid-level CEOs, but every tech guy who embarrassed himself by sucking up to Trump at his inauguration and continue to just, lay down before him, is that they all are victims. And they need to get, okay, I'm going to say this. This is what Kara's little sister says. They need to grow, not a pear, they need to grow a vagina, which is strong and mighty and gives life. And that's what they need. So we need to show people that they have capacity to make a difference, and they do have a voice, and they can create change. And that's what compassion is all about.
And thank you, Kerry, for walking the talk and leading by example in a way no one else can. Thank you. Okay, so my next question to you, Martin, is on similar lines. You're steering organizations and leadership networks at a time when multilateralism is under threat, and leaders, political leaders, are not the most respected guys around. What practical lessons can be drawn from the work that you do, and how do we ensure that we bring credibility back to politics?
Well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here with my good friends here. When I speak now, I listen to what my friend Kailash was saying at the end of that video, and that is when you are committed to making this world a better place, then you're a compassionate leader. And so I said, oh my God, so I'm a compassionate leader because that is what I'm committed to doing. I'm working with a constituency that is about people. Parliaments. Parliaments are institutions that are put in place to serve the people. I agree with you that today parliaments are weak and in many jurisdictions are not as legitimate as they should be. And that is why it's creating this crisis of confidence. And for me, there are lots of things that we could say about using compassionate leadership to fix some of these issues. But let me focus on a couple. And one is inclusion. Inclusion. Compassionate leadership is not good bedfellows with exclusion, right? You have to be inclusive, and our decision-making processes, our institutions must be seen to be inclusive, not only in terms of representation, but also in terms of addressing the interests of all. When I was elected Secretary General of the IPU several years ago, I said I wanted to give voice to those people who in the multilateral environment would not be heard. For instance, the smaller guys in the Pacific, in the Caribbean. When you talk about climate change, yes, climate change is a global threat. But how many people are thinking of the specific existential threats that these communities are facing? I have done my best to give them a platform within the InterParliamentary Union to articulate their concerns so that their voice can be heard here. And if the IPU is able to respond to those concerns, then we're helping to bring back multilateralism to the fore. So inclusion is very important. Listening to the other, understanding their concerns, for me, is very crucial. And that is why in the bureaucracy that we also run, I am very keen to listen to my colleagues who are very diverse. It's a global organization, and of course, you have people of diverse cultures, geographies, and you need to listen to them and take their perspectives into consideration. You talked about young people. Young people and women, I put them together in the same category because they constitute a marginalized group in society. They are not represented, I would say, adequately in the institutions of governance and democracy, whether you're talking of the national level or the international level. And so we need to work to bring up those numbers, women and youth, into the parliaments. Today, we have women accounting for just 27% of parliamentary representation. So parliaments are ruled essentially by men, 73%. When you look at young people, those under 30 account for just 2.7% of parliamentary leadership. So there's a democratic deficit. How do you think that these categories would trust governance. They will not, because decisions are being made to their exclusion. Their future is being decided upon without them being at the table. And that is something that I've been very anxious to drive in the IPU, representation. Representation in numbers, but also in terms of impact, influence. It's not enough to just bring them into Parliament, but you have to give them opportunities within Parliament to prove their worth. And evidence is very clear that once you empower them in that way, they do deliver. So this is something that we want to do. And maybe, I know I'm running out of time, I want to make the point that compassionate leadership should not tolerate violence, especially violence against women politicians. If you want women to be at the table, you have to create an environment where they will feel safe to contribute to governance. That's not the case today. Studies show that 73% of women parliamentarians are victims of violence, whether it's online or offline or physically. It's terrifying, as you say, KERRY, horrible. And this is something that I'm very anxious to work to fix. The last thing is about the other, my night job, being chair of the Global International Gender Champions. And there, we think that it is important for those who have power, some of us who wield some power, to conceive of power not as a God-given right, but as a privilege to serve people, to use the levers of power to deliver on the expectations of the people. And that is why we are pushing for leaders of international organizations, ambassadors, civil society organizations, and increasingly the private sector to commit to gender equality, to make sure that their entities articulate and reflect that moral imperative of inclusion of women in the processes of their different entities. So thank you. I could go on and on, but let me stop at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very pertinent point. We need to empower those who've not been represented traditionally. We must empower systems, and we must ensure that we bring credibility back to politics in some very tangible ways that you highlighted. So thank you for that. Lisa, I'd like to ask you, your work traditionally has highlighted those who have traditionally not been seen, essentially the invisible, invisible sections of humanity, so to speak, real living human beings whom we've overlooked for so long. What role has compassion played in your journey, and what can we do to highlight these stories and make them more mainstream as we fight for justice and equality and rights?
Well, I've spent a lot of time with communities whose lives have been deeply shaped by decisions that were made far away from them. And it's interesting because I really think that inequality doesn't exist because there's a lack of information. It exists because invisibility is efficient and is convenient. I think compassionate leadership is really about choosing to see clearly and allowing that visibility to inform decisions. You know, it's funny, in indigenous cultures, leadership is really defined by like a sense of responsibility, but not authority. And, the decisions are very relatable and they're relational. In fact, the future is in the very room, so to speak, or in the environment in which those decisions are being made. As an example, in the Haudenosaunee tribe, leaders are asked to consider how their decisions will affect future descendants 7 generations into the future. And that, to me, really reshapes what leadership is. It's kind of taking an awareness and making it an actionable truth, right? But then when we talk about compassion, we have to think about what that actually means, because as ASMITA was saying, we often think that that is something that is empathetic and full of kindness and a feeling, but really from my perspective, it's much more demanding than that. Yeah. It's really going forward with an action and keeping your heart in it, I've spent a lot of time with communities that are on the fringes of the global systems. And, it's not because there's not a lot of them, it's because they're sort of invisible. And I think inequality exists in places that invisibility becomes normalized. And being unseen really allows for people to absorb the consequence of things very quietly and without the outside world even knowing about it. I mean, I remember visiting this village in South Africa where their lives were really shaped by the land. You know, like they grazed their cattle, they'd collect the water. They had these lovely pathways that led to other communities and to markets and schools. And then this mining company came in and, you know, with this offer of development. In fact, they even offered financial compensation and jobs, which is, you know, fantastic. But, you know, some people received money, but many didn't. Of course, even fewer received jobs. And the vast majority did not. But what they did have in common was that land. Those grazing areas were fenced in, right? And then women had to walk miles and kilometers to get their water every day. And those communal pathways, of course, were now obstructed. Every day, multiple blasts from explosions would echo into the community because they were excavating the mines. And what's worse is that those blasts were so strong that it would create cracks in the walls. Now, nobody meant any harm from that, but the development really failed to see the people and what might happen to them. And, you know, they had to deal with that fallout. I think, you know, a compassionate form of leadership would be much slower to action and might consider not only what could be grown there, but perhaps also what might be taken away. And if, in fact, you can call, you know, that development that imparted negativity on these villagers progress at all, right? I think what we fail to notice sometimes is that we're really so similar to one another. And when people become data points and land becomes an asset and a culture becomes an obstruction to progress, you know, there's a moral divide there. And I really think leadership has to do with, you know, switching from, you know, can we do this project to maybe should we? And for whom will this serve? It's really slowing down to take into account that whatever progress there is doesn't come at the expense of someone else.
Thank you. Very powerful thoughts, Lisa. And I quite liked what you said about compassion being so deeply embedded in ancient wisdom. We actually believe that each of us are born with compassion, infinite amounts of compassion, and we lose it along the way as layers get formed. It's something so innate and natural to us. You know, we always give this example of a mother. If her child was suffering, she would do whatever it takes, and she becomes this extremely, not just wise, but you know, really pragmatic problem solver. Or even if our own house was burning, you know, we would figure out a way to put out that fire. So what we're saying here is that the world is burning. And is it not each of our responsibility and, you know, a moral imperative that we look at that, we see that as our problem, and we take action? And I also loved your points about compassionate systems and institutions, because ultimately, you know, that really is the highest form of wisdom. If we are building in any institution that is built to last and built to be resilient. To your point about, you know, a lot of investors as well being worried about, you know, their own leadership being, you know, a little bit shaky and not resilient enough. I think compassionate leadership is the answer. Self-compassion allows you to look at a problem in an objective way and solve problems for yourself. Mental health is such an epidemic today. All leaders are plagued with it. In fact, you know, every time I had a late night conversation with any of the CEOs or business leaders during this week, I was actually really, you know, heartened to hear about their plight. They are living under so much stress. And many of them actually told me that, you know, your movement should really talk to the investors and the founders, because the CEOs are actually under a lot of stress to deliver on profits for the next quarter. So there's not much that they can do in spite of the fact that they want to. So yeah, to your point, we have to be compassionate to them as well, and we have to work with the highest leaders and also at the grassroots level. So a lot of work that SMGC does is to empower communities, build resilient communities. In fact, elected council of young people, very much like yourself, who learn the value of democracy, and then they also identify and solve their own problems. This is something that we call compassionate communities, and something that we're looking to bring the world over and build circles of compassion in institutions, in schools, in universities, in corporates, because we feel that human beings need to connect with each other. We were not meant to live the way we're living. We were not meant to talk to ChatGPT to find answers to our problems and connect with each other. So we're doing that. But I would love to hear from all of you, what are the biggest challenges you have faced in your journey as authentic and compassionate leaders, and what has kept you going? KERRY?
Well, I think that the world can feel overwhelming, and it can feel like there's nothing I can do in the enormous face of the world's hills. And there's wisdom in that. But there's also, if you look at what has changed the world, it really has been this compassionate leadership and banding together. So I started, this is what gives me hope. I started working on human rights in the 1980s. All of Latin America was under right-wing military dictatorships. Today, there's not one left standing. All of Eastern Europe was under communism, and it was impossible to think about stopping that system. But today, there's not one left standing. All of South Africa was at the height of apartheid. Nelson Mandela was still in prison. And now South Africa's had a series of freely elected governments elected by a majority of its people. And women's rights was not on the international agenda. Now it is. It's not always as front and center as it should be, but it is. And we just heard the head of the InterParliamentary Union talking about women's rights with such deep knowledge and care. And that is not something that was happening in the 1980s. All those changes came about not because governments wanted them to. Governments tried to stop them. And not because huge militaries wanted them to. Enormous armies tried to stop them. And not because multinational corporations and the folks who come to Davos wanted them to. Those folks tried to stop them. But because small groups of determined people, the people like the people in this room, harnessed the dream of freedom and then band together and said, we can work together to create this change. And as it's been said, this is not one thing that changed the world. It's the only thing that changes the world. So we have the power. We are the people, and we're going to create the changes that we need for ourselves, for our families, for our children, for the next generation. And that's what gives me hope.
Thank you. That's wonderful. No, in fact, we've been very, heartened in our journey over the last 2 years. We've gone in rooms with Supreme Court justices where we thought that, compassion would be dismissed as a soft emotion, but we were amazed to see the response. They looked within and they said that true justice is not possible without compassion. And the stories that they've shared, in fact, we are working with a number of Supreme Court justices on a program on compassionate justice, which means fast, fair, and equitable justice delivery and victim-centric justice delivery, which we're very excited about. And, we're honored to also be working with Martin and IPU on the idea of compassionate governance. Compassionate business and compassionate AI are two other initiatives that we've launched this year, and amazed to see concrete examples of compassionate business leadership. HPE is one of them. We ourselves have worked with Estee Lauder for 20 years to eradicate child labor in the mica mining supply chains. Those are the kind of examples that we are inspired by and that we want to emulate across sectors and across geographies.
Can you just explain what mica is for people who might not know?
Sure. So Estee Lauder and of course other cosmetic companies use mica. You know, a bunch of you are probably wearing highlighters. So that element that gives the shine and the sparkle is actually mica. And unfortunately, you know, there are a number of forced labor and child laborers who are employed in the mica mines. Often there is trafficking involved, the worst abuse of human rights involved. And, you know, William Lauder, to his credit, found out about this 20 years ago and came to our founder, and both of them embarked on this incredible journey together where, you know, they worked on community empowerment in the region where these mica mines existed and created resilience, ensured that all children went to school and also got social protection, access to social protection, which actually empowered them and ensured that, you know, the area became child labor free.
Right, and so if you're wearing some shiny stuff and it's not from Estee Lauder, 70% chance that you're touching a child slave, and almost all of them are girls. I don't quite, some boys, but mostly girls. So we got to stop that.
Yeah.
And also, just FYI, mica is in so many things. So all of us have cars. It's in all the paint.
Yeah.
It's in so
batteries,
many things.
lithium.
Yes, I was working in that this last year.
Yes. I mean, a lot of us, you know, a lot of times we've been in several conversations with practitioners and leaders who are fighting against modern slavery and forced labor. And, you know, folks have asked us, what can we do? What can we do? And this is exactly what we can do. We can educate ourselves and we can demand ethical business practices. You know, there are corporates out there who are doing this front and center and making this part of the mainstream conversation. So it's not like it cannot be done and it cannot coexist with profit making. So let's demand more of it. And as we leave this room, we could pledge to become more ethical and more aware consumers, right? So thank you for that. That's compassionate action right there.
That's correct.
Martin, what are the challenges?
Yeah, well, I always like to look at the glass as being half full. And for me, when I receive a letter from the Prime Minister of Senegal, and he insists that this letter be read to the General Assembly of the IPU. In this letter, he says, Mr. Secretary General, thank you for saving my life. You fought for me. You stood up for me when I was being persecuted by the regime. I was released from jail because of the pressure he put on the government. And today I'm Prime Minister. When I look at the Speaker of the Gambia who writes to me and says, thank you, and he gives me this big picture of myself saying, thank you for saving the girl child in the Gambia because you have fought against unbanning female genital mutilation. Mm-hmm. That makes me tick. It gives me hope, it gives me motivation, and I go to bed saying, yes, I have my job cut out for me. The institution that I lead can make an impact because it's about people, and our motto is for democracy for everyone. And what we mean is that democracy is not an end in itself, it is a tool towards achieving an end, and that is the welfare of the human being. And the other point where I think we can work more to promote compassionate leadership is when we talk about diplomacy. Traditional forms of diplomacy are not compassionate enough. When you look at those who negotiate peace agreements, ask them whether they have actually been to the areas of crisis. They may not have been. But if traditional forms of diplomacy are complemented by what we call parliamentary diplomacy, that is diplomacy led by parliaments, to create an environment that is conducive to peace processes, then I think that we become more compassionate, because then the parliamentarians, being representatives of the people, are able to articulate the views of the people directly, right, without this being done by a minister who has no accountability to the people. So for me, parliamentary diplomacy, dialogue between parliaments is very crucial at this particular time when multilateralism is being challenged. Yes. And I just want to conclude that every disappointment is a blessing. The IPU does not have to contend with Mr. Trump because the United States withdrew from the IPU several years ago. And so what is happening today does not really have an direct impact on us. And so we can. I don't have to contend. I don't have to please him with what I do. I do what I think my heart tells me to do to implement a mandate that has been entrusted to me by the global parliamentary community.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think it's very important to remember that no matter what our politics, we can find something to stand up for, and we must stay true and find the courage to speak the truth. And I'm so glad that this panel is shining examples of leaders who are doing just that. We have a few minutes, and I just wanted to open up the floor for any questions or comments that anybody might have.
Being a 22-year-old woman nowadays is scary. And I just wanted to ask, we hear so much about AI at Davos, and as someone who has experienced Grok and being deepfaked, what's your opinion on that? Kind of on the whole idea of AI being this holy thing and then it not.
Yeah, I think Grok, so for those of you who don't know, so Grok is a new program announced by X, which allows you to manipulate photographs. But what it's immediately started being used for is taking pictures of women and then taking off their clothes. And so you can imagine a bunch of 8th graders taking a picture of one of their classmates and then stripping her and then showing that around the whole class and on the internet. That's what's going on. So here's the question. When Elon Musk decided to release X, did he think what this would do? Did he think, oh yeah, you can use this to make women naked and harm school kids? Did he think about that first? Well, maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. But we're in this society together. So what we want to do right now is make sure that AI is going to transform and revolutionize the world in a way that's never seen over the next 5 years. This isn't going to take 35 years. It's going to be 5 years. So what we want to do is make sure Grok never happens again. We want to make sure that governments are saying to the manufacturers of AI, we will hold you responsible each and every time that it goes wrong. Each and every time it denies a woman a bank loan because she's a woman. Each and every time it denies, it takes pictures. We've got the USA House here, and we have Palantir across the street from it. Okay, so Palantir now works with the United States government under Donald Trump and can take pictures of everybody who goes to a protest in Minneapolis and identify that person and feed that back to the government or to the company that it's working for. So are they making sure that that's not being abused to persecute people through arrests or through stopping somebody from being able to get a job because they showed up at a protest? So these are some of the human rights, I could go on and on and on, but some of the human rights issues that we need to make sure AI is accounting for before they put it out into the public realm, and not so that they have to go and fix it after the damage is done.
First of all, thank you for sharing. Let's give her a big round of applause for her courage and her honesty. It makes me so angry that a 22-year-old girl has to sit here and share this experience. We all have sisters, we all have daughters, we all have people in our network that something like this has happened to or may potentially happen to. Let's stand up against this, guys. Let's hold them accountable. When we are talking about compassionate AI, that's exactly what we mean. We need to hold these structures of technology accountable to make sure that human beings, real living human beings, don't feel unsafe and don't feel that their dignity is being compromised by virtue of these systems designed to literally take over the world. So thank you for that. Anybody else? One last comment.
Follow-up question or a comment on that. As much as we think that regulation and holding them accountable is a large-scale measure to get that happen, right? But as we see, AI is going at a pace where regulators are still trying to catch up, and if you do like something like that, they're still not able to. So for me, I work in AI, so for me, I'm also trying to flip the thing and think like, so how can we bring compassion to the table where the AI decision makers are there? And today we know it's a very small bunch of the companies, but even with them, so how can we even bring that to the table? Any thoughts on that?
Well, for me, I think that AI has the potential to lift humanity up into the skies, right? But it also holds the potential to drag us down into the doldrums. And what we think is important is that we should have a global movement for assessing the impact of AI in every sphere of life. And in the IPU, we are bringing parliaments into the picture because when you talk about regulation, you talk about legislating on the ethical use and development of AI, then it falls in the field of parliaments. And so we want parliaments to be ahead of the curve and make sure that they are at the forefront of the dialogue, the conversation that helps us assess the real impact of AI, and then put in place the legal framework, the legislative framework that would help guide this. I'm very, I would say, realistic in my assessment because the AI is growing so much that it's out of control sometimes. But we need to make some determined effort to try to curb its nefarious impact, as has been pointing out this evening. So yes, legislating, not restraining, because then it looks like you having an assault on freedom of expression, because that's part of it. That balance, that fine balance that you have to strike between regulating something for the common good and not being seen to be constraining a freedom that has been.
But
I was just going to say, being here in Davos this week and seeing all of this AI programming, it makes me feel like I'm surrounded by all these guys on toboggans going down one of these Alps, and it's snowing, but it's snowing, not snowflakes, but dollar bills. And they're just trying to grab them as fast as possible. And there's another toboggan next to them, and they have to get there first. But they know at the bottom of the hill is this huge cliff, which humanity is going off. But they're so thrilled with grabbing dollars, they're not thinking about the cliff that's coming. And the cliff that's coming is the failure to protect human rights when designing AI programs.
Right.
And unfortunately, short-term profits and greed and hunger for power has fueled most of human development. We developed plastic. We saw the utility of it. We never thought about how it's going to take 800 years for it to disintegrate. Well, this is so much worse than that. And we have to wake up now, and we're actually inviting experts like yourself to join us in this journey for compassionate AI. So please reach out. We'd love to work with you and like-minded folks. We have to stick together, and we have to fight this together now.
Yes.
So we're out of time, but can I just do one quick lightning round? So just 30 seconds, guys. What would you say to WEF, the World Economic Forum? What can they do better?
Well, I think WEF could slow down and really be more inclusive so that the people that aren't in the room making the decisions that are so deeply affected by the decisions of WEF have a voice. So there's more accountability and responsibility that's occurring, and compassion can kind of be the guiding force.
Okay, I'm going with that. What she said.
I agree entirely. We need young people like the lady sitting in front of us to be more and more of you to be part of the conversation. It's important. It is. I see the World Economic Forum as a platform for the big guys, right? Heads of state and government, the big corporations and all of that coming here, as you say, grabbing every dollar that is there, but they're not thinking of the welfare of the people. And so inclusion should be something that WEF should take into account. And I take my personal example. I'm living 2 hours away from here because I could not find a room around here at an affordable price, $4,000 a night. You know, our auditors would kill me, so I have to stay that far. And all because, you know, they're not thinking of the smaller guys.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being you. Thank you for all that you do. I do have a little something for you. And I'd like to invite both these young ladies to join us on stage for a final photograph. This is for you. This is the new book that our founder has written about compassion.